I was halfway through the corridor when I heard her voice. Helen, my wife, inside Victor's office, behind a closed door, saying words that would set fire to everything I believed about my life. Once he signs the updated trust documents, it's ours. All of it. And just like that, the numbers stop making sense. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments and what you would have done if you heard your spouse plotting with your son-in-law. My name is Roy. I am 61 years old, financial strategist, or, to put it plainly, I've spent the last 35 years making rich people richer and protecting their wealth like it was radioactive gold. And yet, with all my experience, I didn't see this coming. Let me tell you what happened. Because the truth is, betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in tailored suits and soft voices behind expensive doors. Sometimes it wears your wedding ring. Earlier that day, I had a routine lunch meeting in the city. It ended early, and I found myself driving near Victor's office. My son-in-law, the golden boy, partner at a boutique law firm. He'd helped me with a trust restructure last year. Well-spoken, charming, always smiling a little too long after a joke. We weren't close, but I respected him, trusted him. He was family. And so, when I saw his car in the underground lot, I thought, why not drop in, shake his hand, thank him again for helping with the inheritance documents for Lily, maybe even take him for coffee. I had no idea that 10 minutes later, I'd be standing outside his office door with my entire life unraveling behind that soundproof wood. Are you sure he won't notice? Victor's voice, clipped, smooth, the way he always sounded during court prep. He trusts you, Helen replied, laughing softly. And me, that's the beauty of it. He has no idea what we've been adjusting. My stomach dropped. My first instinct was confusion. Adjusting? What were they talking about? Then I remembered. The new trust documents. The ones Victor offered to tidy up. The ones I hadn't read thoroughly because I trusted him. And her. The next few lines were blurrier, lower volume, but I caught enough. Once the charitable account is closed and reabsorbed, it moves back into shared marital assets. That gives us full leverage. He still thinks Lily's college fund is untouched, Victor added. Helen laughed again. Sweet, stupid Roy. Always planning for everyone's future but his own. I felt my knees buckle. My wife, the woman I married 27 years ago, the woman I built a life for, planned every financial move with. She was plotting to gut me like a retirement fund. I stepped back, breath held, praying no one heard the shift in the floorboard underfoot. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a precision, the financial engineering. They built a structure behind my back, using everything I'd taught Victor, everything Helen had heard over dinner tables and budget meetings. They were using my own tools to destroy me. I reached into my coat pocket, slowly pulling out my phone. Hit record. Held it low, close to the door. We file in August. Victor was saying now, site incompatibility. He'll be too shocked to fight back before the assets transition. And if he does, I've written it so we can countersue. Financial negligence. There's a clause that protects your lifestyle rights post-dissolution. She chuckled. I always said he was brilliant with money, just not brilliant with people. Then she added, God, I've spent 3 decades listening to his rants about tax codes and index funds. The least I deserve is his estate. The audio kept rolling, but my mind had stopped processing. You know what's funny? I spent years advising clients to prepare for lawsuits, deaths, mergers, market crashes, but I never told them how to prepare for marital sabotage, because I didn't think it would happen to me. I slid away from the door just as I heard a chair creak inside. My pulse thundered. I ducked into the hallway restroom and locked the door behind me. For 5 minutes, I just sat there, listening to the recording again, letting every word scar me deeper. By the time I made it back to my car, something inside me had calcified. The pain was there, of course, but buried under something sharper. Determination, cold, analytical resolve. They thought they were playing me. They thought I'd smile and sign whatever was put in front of me. like I had for 27 years. But they forgot who I was. I made my living finding loopholes, protecting assets from governments, lawsuits, and hostile mergers. Now, I was going to protect myself from my own wife and the man who married my daughter. I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove to the one place where I knew I still had control. My private office on the 14th floor of the Whitaker and Stone building, a place Helen had never liked. She called it your fortress. I unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, and walked straight to the filing cabinet in the corner, the one with no labels. Inside, 18 folders. Each one contained the real records, the offshore accounts, the land purchases under holding companies, the retirement portfolios never filed under my name. I opened the Tier 4 envelope. Inside it, a signed power of attorney document, a copy of a will not yet filed, and a letter from my old mentor, Elias, reminding me, Roy, only trust someone with your fortune when you're willing to bury them with it. I took a deep breath and began building the counter-strategy. They want to play a game. They just didn't know I invented it. I sat across from Helen that evening, sipping soup she had prepared in our polished steel kitchen, the same one I'd renovated 2 years ago when she insisted modern luxury better matched her lifestyle. She'd gone quiet for most of dinner, no doubt trying to hide whatever residue of guilt still clung to her. But I wasn't looking for guilt. I was looking for signs. Was she nervous? Was she watching me? Had she heard something? The answer was no. Helen still thought I was the man she designed her life around. Structured, predictable, generous to a fault. She didn't know I'd heard her. She didn't know I was awake. That night, I didn't sleep, not from rage, but from clarity. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling above our bed, a room that had grown colder over the last 2 years. Victor had filled the silence she'd once offered to me, and I had filled the void with work, estate planning, reading quarterly reports until my eyes blurred. Some part of me had known, had felt it, but I didn't want to break the illusion of family. Now, that illusion was shattered, and I needed to know when the fracture had begun. Morning light hit the bookshelves in my home office. Not the one downtown, the one Helen rarely stepped into. I sat at my grandfather's desk, the one I'd inherited along with his copy of The Art of War. I wasn't a soldier, not in the literal sense, but finance is war. And for 35 years, I had fought quietly, for clients, for their children, for their peace of mind. Now I was fighting for my own. I opened the steel safe behind the bookshelf, a custom installation I'd never told Helen about. Inside were folders labeled only in numbers, not names. One caught my attention, 88B, the number I used to mark family contingency accounts. I opened it. Inside, copies of the premarital asset allocations, the original trust one had structured before Helen, and I merged our accounts. Records of a Delaware-based shell corporation I set up in 2005, the controlling interest documents for North Shore Trust Holdings, which technically owned 3 of our biggest properties, including the lake house she thought was in both our names. Helen hadn't known about any of it, not because I was hiding something malicious, but because I believe in protecting the people I loved, even from their own mistakes. Now, it seemed that foresight was about to save me. At noon, I made a call. Frank Hallberg came the voice on the other end, still deep and gravelly, still sharp after all these years. Frank, it's Roy. A pause. Then, how deep are we talking? I smiled. He always knew when I wasn't just calling to chat. About 25 years deep, I said, and possibly $25 million at stake. Say no more. You still using Tier 4 protocol? I opened the folder in front of me. Yes, and I need to move fast without making waves. Frank didn't ask who or why, just how soon. Over the next 48 hours, I worked like a machine. Transferred liquid assets from joint accounts into secured trusts Lily couldn't see. Revoked Helen's quiet power of attorney. Re-registered certain real estate titles under North Shore Trust with updated protections. Froze the charitable fund, the same one they were planning to reabsorb, citing suspicious plan manipulation. And all of it was legal. Clean, quiet, invisible, unless you knew what you were looking for. Meanwhile, Helen continued her act. "I'm thinking of redecorating the guest room," she said one morning, sipping coffee like we were still some suburban dream couple. "Maybe new wallpaper. Something softer." I watched her fingers. Still polished. Still composed. This was the same woman who, just 3 days ago, had called me sweet, stupid Roy. Now she was complimenting my shirt and humming in the kitchen. I matched her performance. Smiled when appropriate. Pretended to read the newspaper while watching her from the corner of my eye. And all the while, inside my mind, numbers moved like soldiers across a battlefield. That night, I pulled out an old photo album. It wasn't nostalgia. It was investigation. I flipped through page after page. Our wedding in 1996, our honeymoon in Spain, Lily's birth in 1992. Wait, a small pang hit me. Helen hadn't been as warm then. I remembered holding Lily while Helen sat quietly in the hospital bed, distant. Had it always been performative? Had I mistaken her composure for strength? My mind replayed memories with new eyes. Her constant reminders to keep things in your name. "Honey, I don't want the stress." Her insistence on helping sort the files when Victor started doing our legal work. Her interest in learning about offshore vehicles after our 20th anniversary. They weren't acts of partnership. They were reconnaissance. The final puzzle piece fell into place when I checked a hidden camera feed from my downtown office, one I'd installed last year after a minor break-in. Victor had visited last Thursday, without an appointment. I watched the footage. He walked around, checked the shelves, opened a drawer, took nothing, but searched. Helen must have told him where to look, but they didn't know about the real files, locked behind biometric access. They had no idea that the Real Empire was behind another wall. That night, as Helen read her novel by the fireplace, I said, "You ever wonder what happens to people who assume they know everything?" She looked up. "What brought that on?" "Just thinking about trust." I sipped my tea. How once it's gone, it never comes back the same. She tilted her head, curious, or pretending to be. "You okay, Roy?" I smiled. Never better. Inside, I was sharpening my tools, because Helen and Victor thought I was sleeping. They thought I was soft, passive, blind. They forgot who I am. The man they thought was sleeping had just opened his eyes, and he was building the most important structure of his life. Their downfall. The signature was smooth. 2 strokes, then a final loop. My pen hovered a second longer than usual. I looked at the document again. Last will and testament, Roy Whitaker, revised and sealed. Beneath it, Helen, disinherited. Lily, assigned as beneficiary of a protected trust fund. All real estate and business holdings. Transferred into the Whitaker Preservation Foundation, a nonprofit entity I quietly incorporated years ago for philanthropic planning. In truth, it was my sanctuary, a fortress masked as generosity. Helen could scream, sue, and slander. She could not penetrate a federally protected nonprofit trust. And Victor? He'd have to battle legal layers that even he wouldn't see coming. The notary finished stamping the envelope and slid it into the fireproof vault. Frank gave me a long look as he closed the door. "You sure about this?" "I was never more certain," I said. "Time to give them exactly what they think they want." That same afternoon, I let them think I'd loosened the reins. Dropped a small deposit into our old joint checking account. Just enough to notice, not enough to trace. Left an old investment file on the home printer, where Helen could accidentally find it. She did. The next morning, I caught her sliding the file back into my drawer. She smiled like she always did when caught somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. "I was looking for a receipt," she said. I nodded and sipped my coffee. "You find what you needed?" "Oh, yes," she said too quickly. I smiled. So, did she? 2 actors in the final scene, each pretending the other didn't know their lines. Later that night, she texted someone in the guest bathroom. I knew who. "Helen, he's showing movement. Increased deposits. He's working on something, but he's not pushing back. I think he's letting go. You were right. Summer's our window. Victor, keep him thinking you're still loyal. We finished this clean." Clean. That word made me laugh. What they were planning was anything but clean. And when the moment came, the mess would belong to them. The only part that still nagged at me was Lily. She deserved none of this. Victor was her husband. Helen was her mother. And I was about to burn down the house she thought was home. So I asked her to meet me for lunch. She arrived exactly on time, a trait I always admired in her. Still the same warm, organized, composed daughter I raised, or thought I raised. "Is everything okay, Dad?" I nodded, though my throat was tight. We ordered food, talked about small things. Her upcoming therapy license renewal. Her plans for a vacation in Maine. Victor never came up. So I tried. "You happy?" I asked. She blinked. "You mean in general?" "No, I mean with him." She smiled, but her fingers tightened around her water glass. "It's not perfect. But marriage isn't right," she said, voice light. Then she added, "He's been really focused on work lately." I nodded. "He does seem ambitious." Her lips twitched into something between pride and apology. "That's why Mom likes him so much." I didn't push further. Didn't want to break the spell. Not yet. Before we left, I handed her a sealed envelope. She looked surprised. "What's this?" "Just something I've been working on for you. Long-term security. You don't have to open it now." She nodded, sliding it into her bag. Inside that envelope was a full disclosure of the Whitaker Education Trust, a $2.5 million fund I created solely in her name, protected from both Victor and Helen. She wouldn't need it today. But soon, maybe very soon, she'd realize it was the one thing I gave her that couldn't be taken away. That night, Helen poured herself wine and joined me on the couch like nothing had shifted. "How was your day?" she asked, voice silky. "Productive," I said. "I signed a few important things." She tilted her head slightly. "Like what?" I smiled. "Let's just say I rewrote some assumptions." Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then she laughed, soft and musical. The laugh I used to adore. The next morning, I walked into my downtown office to find a courier had delivered a binder. No sender name. No note. Inside, full financial valuations of my companies. A list of my assets and their estimated worth. Several flag pages with potential vulnerabilities. My stomach turned. Victor was testing the waters, looking for cracks. He must have hired someone to audit from the outside, assuming I wouldn't see it as an attack. I called Frank. "They're digging," I said. "They'll find nothing you didn't give them," he replied. Then, after a pause, "But do you want them to find something?" That gave me pause. Then I nodded. "Yes." We prepared a set of dummy documents, asset charts with inflated values, exposed joint accounts, forgotten offshore details. All of it legal, all of it bait. And we leaked it, just enough. That weekend, Helen was practically glowing. She kissed me on the cheek when I brought her tea. "You're such a good man," she whispered. "You always take care of us." I smiled and said nothing. She thought she'd won, because I let her taste the victory first. People like Helen don't panic until they think everything is theirs, and then you take it. That evening, I slipped the newly signed will into the Whitaker Foundation vault. No one but Frank had access, and it wouldn't be filed until I said so. But the moment Helen filed for divorce, or the moment Victor made a move, that document would surface like a torpedo. I stood in the quiet of my office, alone, watching the city lights blink across the skyline. Helen once said she loved how I made everything feel secure, how I always had a plan. She should have remembered that. They think they're waiting me out. But I'm not aging. I'm aiming. He's either completely in the dark or he knows everything. That's what Victor texted my wife during dinner. And the best part? I read it while he was still chewing his steak. I invited Victor for dinner under the guise of gratitude. My way of saying thank you. I'd said on the phone, "You've been helping Helen with the trust restructuring. I'd like to buy you a good meal." He hesitated for a beat, then accepted. Of course he did. He couldn't resist the opportunity to size me up. He thought he was walking into a game of chess. He didn't realize I'd already taken his queen. We met at the Black Oak, a place with dim lighting, discreet staff, and a private back room. The kind of place where deals were made and secrets were swallowed. Victor arrived in his usual gray suit, tie slightly loosened to appear casual. His handshake was firm, his smile rehearsed. "Roy," he greeted. "Appreciate the invitation." "Of course," I said, waving the server over. "Your family." He sat down, scanned the room, then relaxed when he saw we were alone. Mistake number one. We ordered wine. I chose red. He nodded in approval, likely assuming I was too old-fashioned for nuance. I let him think that. "How are things at the firm?" I asked, casually slicing into the bread. "Busy," he said. "Couples filing left and right. Must be something in the water." I chuckled. "Yes, divorce can be expensive water." He smiled, but his eyes narrowed just enough to betray a flicker of discomfort. The appetizers came. Seared scallops with citrus butter. "I've been reviewing some of my older asset allocations," I said, watching his reaction, thinking about tightening up a few loose ends. Victor nodded. "Always smart to stay current with your holdings." "MMM, especially with how easily things can drift. You think you've set a boundary, then suddenly someone's on your side of the fence." His fork paused midair. Then he smiled again. "You've always had a way with metaphors, Roy." That's what Helen used to say. A quiet moment passed. I sipped my wine. Victor finally asked, "Is everything all right? With the accounts? Or the family?" I asked innocently. "Both," he replied. I leaned back. "Depends who you ask." We moved on to the main course. Filet mignon, rare for me, medium for him. Victor started talking about market trends, trying to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. But I wasn't interested in neutral. I wanted the temperature rising. "You ever work with someone who thought they were 10 steps ahead?" I asked suddenly, but they were really walking into a pit? He blinked. "Sure, it happens." "And how do you handle that?" "I prepare for both outcomes." "So do I." Silence. Then I watched him shift in his chair. Subtle, but real. He excused himself to the restroom. His phone buzzed as he walked away. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the clone device Frank had helped me set up. I'd mirrored Helen's text a week ago. Now, I mirrored Victor's too. Victor, he's either completely in the dark, or he knows everything. Helen, stick to the plan. He's bluffing. He always folds under pressure. They were still underestimating me, and I was still letting them. Victor returned, more composed. I smiled as dessert arrived. Creme brulee, Helen's favorite. "Funny," I said. "I almost invited Helen tonight, but I figured she preferred to spend the evening reviewing our trust paperwork." A flicker of panic in his eyes. Quickly masked. "I'm sure she'd love that," he said. "MMM. She does seem passionate about the details lately. Very hands-on." Victor cleared his throat. "She's just looking out for your interests." I nodded slowly. "Yes, that's what I thought too." As the check arrived, I reached for my wallet, then paused. "You ever read that story about the fox and the grapes?" I asked. Victor looked confused. "Of course. Aesop's fable." "Right," I said, standing. "It's not always the grapes that are sour. Sometimes it's the fox that's desperate." He didn't respond. I signed the bill, shook his hand, and leaned in slightly. "Thanks again for everything, Victor," I said softly. "But do be careful walking in the dark. Some traps are buried deeper than they seem." I left him standing there, smile frozen, mind racing. He had no proof, no confession, just doubt. And for men like Victor, doubt is poison. That night, I poured myself a scotch and sat at my study desk, staring at the screen where I monitored the security feeds. At 9:14 p.m., Helen entered my office. She moved quickly, nervously, opened my desk drawer, found a folder. Her eyes lit up for a second, then confusion. Inside were financial reports. Complex, real, but out of date by 5 years. I watched her flip through the pages with growing frustration. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a new memo to Frank. Initiate phase 2, delay trigger, maintain surveillance. because now I wasn't just building protection. I was building the trap, and Victor had just stepped into it. It was a Tuesday when the official letter arrived. I recognized the attorney's name. Not someone I'd ever worked with. Too aggressive. Too arrogant. The kind of lawyer that promises the moon, then sends you a bill for the eclipse. Inside the envelope, a formal notice of divorce proceedings, a list of marital assets, an estimate of projected lifestyle support, and a demand that I relinquish control over all shared properties until division was complete. There was even a line, bolded and underlined, that said, Mrs. Helen Whitaker is entitled to continue the quality of life she has grown accustomed to over the course of a 27-year marriage. I laughed, out loud, for a solid minute. Then I poured a glass of bourbon, sat at my desk, and opened the folder labeled Final Phase. Frank arrived at my office that evening. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just handed me a folder and a USB drive. This ends them, he said. I nodded. It doesn't just end them. I replied, it shows them what happens when you betray a man who taught you how to play the game. 2 days later, we filed a counter-motion. Attached to it, a digital copy of the 43-minute audio recording, time-stamped and backed up 3 times. A notarized log of suspicious financial behavior over the past year. Helen's access history to accounts she had no legal claim to. A private investigator's report, confirming Victor's presence in my office on multiple nights while I was away. And most importantly, a legal declaration of the Whitaker Preservation Foundation's ownership over every property, every business account, every investment, all protected under irrevocable nonprofit status, all untouchable. Helen's lawyer, no doubt riding high on promises of mansions and payouts, went pale when the judge requested a recess to review the audio. Victor wasn't in court, but his name was. Every time Helen referred to him in that recording, Victor said we'll file in summer. Victor's firm already drafted the papers. Victor's sure we'll get at least 60%. He wasn't just complicit. He was leading it. The judge returned 45 minutes later. The courtroom was quiet. Helen sat 2 rows ahead, back stiff, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I didn't look at her. Not once. I didn't need to. Her world was already cracking. Mr. Whitaker. The judge said, eyes scanning the documents again. I must say, this is the most comprehensive preemptive estate protection I've seen in 25 years. I inclined my head. Your Honor, Helen's lawyer said, standing awkwardly. My client was unaware of... She was unaware of what? The judge interrupted. The recording clearly captures her discussing plans to deceive and defraud her spouse. This is not a case of marital breakdown. This is strategic betrayal. By noon, the court had denied Helen's request for temporary control of any marital property, suspended all financial claims pending further investigation, and instructed the State Bar to initiate a professional conduct review of Victor Lawton Esq. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Lily, Dad, I don't know what to say. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. You don't have to say anything. Just take your time. I never thought. They said you were hiding things. I was. From them. Not from you. I know. I love you. I'll call tomorrow. I'll be here. That same evening, Victor's name began trending on local news sites. Attorney under fire for alleged role in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme involving father-in-law, insider manipulation and trust exploitation, a family divided in court. The footage of Victor walking out of the courthouse, dodging cameras, was almost cinematic. Helen wasn't beside him. She had slipped out the back, escorted by her attorney, her once confident walk replaced with something more hunched. I didn't celebrate. I didn't toast. I didn't smile in the mirror. I sat in the stillness of my study, fire crackling, silence heavier than before. Because victory doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it just feels like the end of something you thought was real. Still, I couldn't lie. Watching Helen's lawyer try to negotiate when everything was legally out of reach? Satisfying. Watching Victor's license get suspended? Delightful. And knowing that the last 18 months of their lives had been spent planning a future that was never legally possible? That was justice. I walked out onto the balcony, the cold air sharp against my face. Below, the city moved on, cars, people, lights. Above, the stars, old, constant, distant. And in the middle, me, Roy Whitaker, a man they tried to erase, a man they thought they could rob blind, a man who gave them enough rope to weave their own noose. She thought she could steal my legacy, but in the end, she's the one who has to live with the ruins. They didn't just try to steal my wealth. They tried to rewrite my life. But I was never theirs to control. I was the man she couldn't break. And now, I'm the man they couldn't follow. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of betrayal. It was the silence of healing. Helen's perfume no longer lingered in the bedroom. The soft clink of her wine glass, the tap of her manicured nails on marble, the forced laugh that used to echo through our dinners. All of it was gone. I didn't miss it. What I missed were things I never actually had. Real love, honesty, mutual trust. Turns out, missing something fake is easier to recover from than losing something real. I packed her last box that morning. Everything she left behind had been labeled, stacked, sealed. It sat by the front door for 2 weeks before she sent someone to pick it up. No return address. Just a simple envelope, tucked under the twine. My name was written in her handwriting. Elegant, careful, controlled. Inside, a single page. Roy, I never thought it would end like this. We were partners once. Somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like you're equal and started feeling like you're dependent. That's not an excuse, just a reason. I love the life you built, even if I stopped loving how you built it. I wish you peace. I wish you closure. I wish you didn't hate me. Helen, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the fire. No rage, no drama, just quiet release. 3 days later, Lily came over. Victor had moved out. They were officially separated. She didn't cry, but I could see the wreckage in her eyes. We sat outside on the porch, the one I rebuilt after the hailstorm in '09, though it still smelled faintly of cedar. I should have seen it, she said. You weren't supposed to, I replied. He fooled me too. But I lived with him. You live with a mask. She looked down at her hands. What kind of daughter does that make me? I reached over and covered her hand with mine, the kind worth protecting. Always. We didn't talk about Helen. We didn't need to. The space she left behind was big enough to fit silence. And sometimes silence is all you need. In the weeks that followed, I began to let go, not just of her or the marriage or the plans we'd made, but of the version of me who needed her approval, the man who measured success by how much comfort he could provide, the husband who thought building someone a palace would make them feel like a queen. I'd been building castles for a stranger. Now, I was learning how to build peace for myself. I sold the main house. Too many ghosts. I moved into a smaller property out near the coast, one I bought years ago but never used. It wasn't flashy. No marble, no imported fixtures. Just quiet, trees, ocean breeze. Time. I filled the garage with books instead of cars. Turned the dining room into a workshop. Started writing again. Journaling. Planning. Not for defense. For freedom. One morning, as the sun was rising over the water, I walked down to the shoreline with a photo in my hand. Helen and I, 27 years ago. Our first dance. She was laughing. I was grinning. Back then, I thought that photo captured love. Now, I realized it captured hope and illusion. I held it for a moment longer, then let the wind take it. It fluttered, twisted, and finally disappeared. Do I hate her? No, I pity her, because she could have had all of this. The trust, the legacy, the peace. If she'd just chosen loyalty over greed. She had a man who would have given her everything. Instead, she tried to steal it. And now she has nothing that matters. Victor? Last I heard, his firm pushed him out. Bar suspension pending. No clients. No courtroom. Just a name tied to scandal and shame. Funny how a man who mastered legal loopholes fell into the one he didn't see coming. Me. Lily visits often now. She brings me photos of her therapy center, The one she finally opened after we cleaned up the mess. She says it feels like starting over. I tell her that's not what it is. This is the real beginning, I said. The rest was just preparation. She smiled and said, like father, like daughter. Sometimes I still hear Helen's voice in dreams, but not the Helen I knew at the end, the one from our early years. The laughter, the champagne, the hope. I don't chase those dreams away. I let them play, because memory is a teacher, not a prison. I don't need revenge anymore. I don't need justice. I've already won. She tried to break me with betrayal, but I was forged in something stronger than trust. I was built from discipline, shaped by loss, powered by focus. And now, I am no longer protecting an empire. I'm living a life. So, if you're listening to this, and you've ever been betrayed, lied to, left behind, let me tell you something. You're not broken. You're just being rebuilt, because they only win if you don't rise.